Welcome, everyone, to the Generation Lyme podcast. My name is Jesse Ruben. I am on the board of Generation Lyme, along with my two co-podcasters, Jennifer Hoffmann and Haley DiBiase. That's not right. Whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We are doing a monthly series where we have a podcast dedicated to our monthly topic. Every month we choose a different topic for our meetups for people to share about and to talk about. And we wanted to elaborate on those topics and sort of get a little bit more into detail about our own experiences with that topic. This month's topic is communication. So we are going to be discussing how communicating impacts Lyme patients specifically, no matter where they are in their journey, talk a little bit about our own personal experiences that have impacted us around the topic. Before we get started, if you are looking for information about our meetups, you can go to genlyme.org. We have information on our podcast. Please rate and review us 5 stars. We would super appreciate it, and we are so happy that you found us. Haley and Jennifer, how are we doing today?
Thriving.
Oh, good. Thriving as well.
It is approximately 400 degrees in New York City today. Only some of us have air conditioners happening in the rooms that we are currently in, so this could get very, very interesting. Jennifer, we're going to start with you. The topic of the month is communication. Every month we have a brief discussion about what we think the topic should be and why. We have a whole long list of words and topics that we can use. We try and make them broad enough for people to talk about, but specific enough that people actually share about real things. For you, why do you think communication is an important topic for the Lyme community?
Well, I think communication is an important topic for the Lyme community because it is crucial, and it is crucial for a lot of reasons. We are constantly trying to educate the world about Lyme disease and tick-borne illness, and trying to raise awareness and ultimately help us get better care. And we're trying to educate the people in our lives and communicate with them so that we can make our lives easier and theirs too, maintain our relationships, um, tell people what we need, ask for help, just kind of exist. And many of us also with Lyme have develop issues with communication and in one form or another. Lyme is an often presents as a neurological condition, and that can come along with many things that impact your ability to communicate. And so working with that is pretty vital to, which is a key part of many of our experiences. And so we've chosen communication for the past 2 years in May as our monthly topic because May is Lyme Disease Awareness Month. So not only is it helpful for us as a community, who also, by the way, spends all of our time communicating with each other, and that's a huge part of how we thrive as a community and how we support each other and how we survive day to day, not just survive, but feel as good as possible, so that we could kind of work on that together, talk to each other. It serves our community internally, but then also use that topic to, for the unique opportunity of Lyme Awareness Month, to share more clips from stories that people have shared with us on our platform, to raise awareness in ways that we don't so much any other month, to really highlight the experience of having Lyme disease and communicate to the world what people in our community go through.
That was a really good answer.
Thanks.
And I love the use of the word thriving. I love that we're using that word today. So on the topic of thriving, Haley, for you, sort of the same question. Why, for you, do you think it's important that we allow the people that are coming to our meetups or the people following us online to highlight communication in their conversations?
I don't know if I can even add anything to what Jennifer said. That was so
Very good.
thorough.
That's actually the end of the podcast. We're
Yeah,
done.
that's
now.
it.
Wait,
We're
no.
done.
No.
That was all we needed to know. I mean, yeah, I think I personally had a period of time in my illness where I could not communicate physically with people around me. And I notice now in my life with the friends I've made since I've been sick and my family with the totally different relationships that we have now compared to pre-main sickness. Communication is a lifeline, and it's what I look for in people I'm meeting, and it's what I look for in every relationship I have. And with something like Generation Lyme, having other people who also have Lyme that you can communicate with is similar to what Jennifer says, just key to survival. Yeah, before this group, I didn't really have Lyme people to communicate with either, and felt very alone. And yeah, I just think you need communication to live, especially when you have hard stuff in your life, which everyone does, especially these days.
So you're saying before Gen Lyme, you didn't have people to talk to about it. Were you actively looking for that? Was that something that you wanted? Did you just think, I'm just going to have to deal with this by myself? Or was it something you were actively searching for?
D, all of the above. I was searching for it, and I've mentioned a few times on some of these podcasts that something like Generation Lyme was something I wanted to create. I just didn't know how to create it on my own. So I was actively looking for a community, but I was also really tired of looking for a community and coming up empty or in really toxic relationships or something like that. So short answer is no. Before Generation Lyme, there was really no community. So when I tell people part of the reason we made this was because we needed community too, that is actually true.
Totally. Jennifer, before we started recording, you mentioned that you were like a little nervous about this podcast today versus other topics, and I'm sure you didn't want me to bring that up, but but I am, and I'm just wondering why, because we've done a bunch of these podcasts and a bunch of different topics. What is it about communication specifically that is a little bit more daunting or nerve-wracking for you?
Yeah, I may have, speaking of communication and getting specific, I wonder if I misused the word nervous. I think, because I use the word fairly often in my personal life, but I think I see communication as so broad and so important. And like for me, and we discussed this also before the podcast, it's been such a huge part of my experience in difficult ways, big ways, bad ways, and then ultimately good ways. And then a mix of all kinds of other stuff too, that I just see it as such a broad topic that really permeates so many areas of life that we all deal with one way or another, whether we realize it or not. And I kind of just wanted to do right by it. And that was why I was like, oh, I'm nervous.
Well, I think it would be helpful to some of our listeners, because we have people listening to these podcasts, as you know, who are just getting diagnosed or who have been sick for a while or who have been sick their whole lives. I mean, we really have everywhere on the Lyme spectrum. So I think might be helpful to get more into specifics about both of you guys, some of your experiences with having issues communicating. For me, one of my biggest symptoms was like my memory and brain fog and stuff. So communicating and remembering things, that was really challenging. But I feel like just hearing and knowing some of your backstories a little bit more in depth. I mean, Jennifer, when you joined our board, you were having cognitive speaking issues.
Yeah, I think I also maybe didn't misuse the word nervous, because when we talk about this, I get like a migraine,
Well,
which is good. I mean, it's not.
Don't get a migraine.
No,
We
it's
don't
fine.
want you to
It's
suffer.
fine. It's like a sign to me sometimes that I don't know. I'm nervous for a reason, because it's an indicator that, something happened somewhere that is a bit triggering for me. But the way I see it, it's not something that I feel the need to ignore. It's certainly not at this time. And so I'm glad we're talking about it. Yeah. So I was like, let's preface this with the irony being that I communicate. My job is me, like, to communicate. I communicate daily, mostly through writing, but like I communicate with people in this community constantly, whether they know it or not. And but when I joined, and I was not even interested in that, let alone capable of it. I had a lot of trouble talking about my feelings on the subject, and I was not interested. I probably went through most of my life not being someone who talked about feelings all that much to begin with, and certainly didn't communicate those things accurately. It was just not like a muscle that I had ever exercised. But I had fairly recently, when I joined the board, not too long before that, I had a couple brain injuries as a result of Lyme and co. And so I had transient ischemic attacks with mini strokes, which left me with long-term effects. So my infections presented largely neurologically, though not entirely. I just ended up focusing on that because I had them for so long that by the time they got neurological, that was the thing I cared about most, even though it wasn't the only the only system that got affected. But so by the time I joined, it was really, really hard for me to, I think, organize my thoughts. I had thoughts and I had ideas, and they were, at that point, they were clear-ish, which I think kind of got me to meet all of you. But I was still not confident in my style of communication in terms of like, back up. Sorry. Honestly, this topic, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, so let's just like power through this. When I talk about this particular thing that happened in my life, this thing that's happened now more than once, I revert a little bit to the way I was when it happened. It's like a trauma response that I know is a thing and it's valid. And if other people out there have this happen, it's valid that it doesn't mean there's, yeah, like it's.
Haley just raised her hand.
Yeah.
For those of you listening.
And thank you for that. Like it used to really, I mean, I think that's part of what makes me nervous, that when I'm going to talk about how much better I am at communicating now, I'm going to get worse at communicating while I talk about it, because I'm going to talk about this time that was really freaking traumatizing. But anyway,
Very valid.
thank you. When I had these experiences, I went from being a very someone who's very comfortable with language to someone who could not string a sentence together, pronounce words, remember what words meant, etc. Read, write. And so building back from that took years. And so by the time I got on the board, I was somewhere in there, not fully, but like, somewhere. And because I didn't get good care, which is another story for another day. I didn't get great care. I didn't have a lot of rehab at my disposal. I kind of did it myself. And I was also treating my infections with it. And that took a long time. And that was ultimately what was really the kind of thing that was really helpful. It just took a long time. So, and then we had I had a lot of isolation prior to the pandemic, and then we had the pandemic. And so by the time I joined you guys, it was like, people, oh my God, talking about a subject that I had hidden in my life for the majority of my life. I had not talked about my illness like this. I had not met people, as Haley brought up, like you guys to communicate with. So it was like in a bit of having to learn another language. I was watching and listening to you communicate so well on this topic and observing it, and sometimes being like, I can't relate. I can completely relate. And I can't imagine myself ever getting there, to talking so comfortably about what I experience physically or whatever. So that's even just that. And then I got a lot better at it. But then, as you all know, I recently, in this past October, listeners may not know, had another it was because of a chemical exposure. I had another TIA and had a lot of those same symptoms again. This time I knew this crew. I also had my diagnosis. I was on the phone with Haley when it happened. Well, she offered to be on the phone and communicated with me through it, which I think actually helped a lot. I think I probably retained a lot of my language ability. And then I was on a Gen Lyme call a few days after, and you all heard and saw how different it was to communicate after. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm jumping around, but there are a lot of different ways in which it's hard to communicate, and it's hard to tell people about the kinds of things that can happen or have happened, or even how you're feeling in a moment when you're explaining them even fairly well, or like normally.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I couldn't talk, but you're talking
Right.
fine now, so whatever.
Right. Were there, besides treating the infection, were there things that you found to be helpful to regain your language? I mean, were you literally teaching yourself to speak again?
Yes. I mean, I couldn't form word, my tongue was not doing the right. Yeah, I was having trouble forming words. I had, a stammer and a stutter, and it was, and I was nervous to try to talk. And so I listened a lot. I observed a lot of people. And then I practiced. I also found that doing other types of speaking. Yeah. Wow. I also found that doing other forms of brain retrain, like therapies, like music and or art, were really helpful to me, because they kind of connected some things that I couldn't connect just by working on language. And then this last time, it seemed like I reverted really, really far in October again. This is a 2021 TIA, and it's almost like I'm back to where I was in 2018. I was not happy about that. But this time I had new tools at my disposal, and I did some physical therapy type things where I would start identifying. This is something I did in 2018 though, I as well. I would look at an object and try to sound out the word and do it over and over again. And it was really slow at first, and sometimes the word wouldn't come out. Like sometimes I would try to speak and nothing would happen. And I would just keep going.
What were some examples of words that you would do this with?
Like chair, lamp,
Wow.
like chair, lamp, rug. whatever I saw in the room that I was in. And then I would start this physical therapy exercise where I would take my right hand and tap on, say that my right hand, then tap on my left temple, and then alternate with my left hand, my right temple, and then different points, say right hand, left shoulder, etc. And my physical therapist taught me this, and that's a coordination exercise. And so I had a few coordination exercises that also helped me. And then I sort of graduated to speaking while I was doing that to try to speed up and reconnect the processes. And then just because I was a little bit aggressive personally, I did that while singing, which I think helped me a lot as well.
Haley, you gave a very knowing smile and nod just then. Is that because just from hearing about Jennifer's experience or from your own personal experiences as well?
Own personal, little deja vu as
Oh,
Jennifer's
you were
talking.
doing the same stuff?
Similar. So yeah, very similar, but also very different from Jennifer. I had a period of about 2.5 years where I couldn't form words either. It wasn't from a TIA. It was just, I know I had fissures in my brain, but it was just from really bad neuro Lyme and co-infections. My ability to, all of my sensory and communication ways were kaput, basically. So I couldn't see, I couldn't talk for about 2 years. So I was just, I also couldn't write. Forget about it. So I was nodding because, well, first of all, to go back, I was validating Jennifer on how when she talks about being able to communicate, her communication skills go down.
I'm so sorry, that's terrible.
No, it's true. And I totally relate to that, because as soon as I start talking about how I used to not be able to communicate or be a human in society, I start having a stutter, my brain fog gets worse, my word searching gets worse. And I immediately go back to this place of like, I'm stupid, I can't communicate. And it's so untrue. And my healthy brain knows that, but my sick PTSD brain is totally there.
And we hear that all the time, right? From people who are having neurological symptoms like, I can't believe how stupid I am. I hate this. Like, what happened to me? And
Right.
it's amazing the like self-victim blaming that we see from people to themselves of just like, I know that like my brain used to function at a certain level and now it doesn't anymore. And am I dumb now? And
Right.
because they're like don't understand what's happening in their brain or why or anyway.
Well, and so many, we know so many people now with chronic Lyme. I mean, we all kind of are where we live, the Lyme people, right? That people send people to.
Oh yeah.
So we meet new people all the time. And I don't know if there's ever been an instance where it hasn't been some super talented person who either super athlete, super musician, you know, semi-genius or total genius, and just got totally taken
She's talking
out.
about you, Jennifer.
All of you refer to Jennifer. No. But just people who, they have a reason to think highly of themselves, rightfully so. And all of a sudden this disease comes and wipes out all of these abilities that they once had. And all of a sudden, and I'm talking about myself as well, all of a sudden the sense of identity is just wiped out, and you do feel stupid. And it's like, I can't even say hi, or without having a seizure or something. And it's hopefully not a lifelong struggle of getting your self-confidence back. I definitely have more confidence now than I did even a year ago, but I still struggle with it sometimes. And like, you know, in classes and stuff, if it's my turn to present, I get a little freaked out that I'm going to stutter and people are going to think I'm stupid. And, but everyone else stutters too when they're presenting a project, you know? So I think it's really important. It's been really important for me. And I think it's really important for people in a community like ours to remember that normal people screw up too, with communication. And actually, if anything, people with a chronic illness like Lyme, we almost excel in communication because we've had to learn how to communicate. Whereas a lot of people who have not had something like this happen to them in their life have no idea how to actually communicate with the world. They can get through the world, they can work a 9 to 5, but the relationships we have with ourselves, others, with our doctors, with everyone, the way we communicate with the world is very different. And it's one of the things I'm grateful for that never would have happened if it wasn't for Lyme. Twisted, but grateful. But yeah, to go back, I was kind of laughing-ish and nodding my head when Jennifer was talking about doing the one word exercises around the room, because I would do the same thing after a couple of years of not being able to form words. I also didn't really have care to teach me things. So YouTube came in handy. But
What were you looking up on YouTube?
Well, YouTube retaught me how to walk. So I would look up like
you literally YouTubed how to relearn to walk.
Well, I would watch videos of people who had been paralyzed having physical therapy, and I would kind of just mimic what they were doing. So I did that with many aspects of my life. I did that to relearn how to write and speak. And I also had separation anxiety with my parents because I didn't know, you know, when a seizure would come or anything. So I was around them a lot, and I started going to outings with them, and I would kind of sit in the corner and just watch how everyone in the room would, sorry, Jennifer, I feel like I'm triggering her, but I would just watch and basically study people to the degree of, okay, she walked in, she took her shoes off at the door. Okay, take your shoes off at the door.
Like to relearn how to be like a quote unquote normal person.
Yeah. And then like, okay, then they hugged the host. Okay, hug the host when you see the host. Okay. And then they were telling a joke. She said this, this, and this. She said, hi, my name is, and then said her name, and then they shook hands. Okay, so you say that sentence. Like it was literally, and I still do this at friend gatherings even. I'll just all of a sudden stop talking and just watch, because now I think it's fascinating to watch. But I did that for a good year before I went out in the world on my own. So between that and at my house, I would look around, and I had my childhood cat at the time. Her name was Sunny. So I would kind of say like, Sunny is playing, and I'd be watching her. And I was also getting vision therapy at the time, which was similar to what Jennifer was saying about the tapping. They were teaching me some coordination exercises, and then I'd have to talk while I was doing them.
You guys are doing so great.
Oh my God, that reminds me of so many things that I did that I didn't even.
So I mean, to go back to communication, because that's why we're here this evening. I think it's such an, what's the right word? Underappreciated thing in life. when you're sick, it's like you don't know what you have till it's gone kind of thing, right? People don't realize how important communication is. And then one day, literally one day, you wake up and you cannot communicate anymore. And it's a real holy shit moment. And everything is gone when you can't communicate. Friends, family, your sense of self, even if people are there, they're not there because you can't communicate with them. And it's a very frightening and isolating experience, just being trapped and not being able to say what you want to say. This is going way deeper than I was planning. But
welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, right. But my whole point of saying all this is that there's such a scale of communication. And if you're in the place that you can't communicate literally anything, or you are so good at communication that you're like, why am I even listening to this podcast? Anywhere in between those, no matter how you feel about where you are, it's valid. Like even people who have the best communication think they suck at communication sometimes, you know? So I don't know. I always go back to that. I know personally my communication in every form it is, like actual words coming out of my mouth, being able to write, or just being able to have healthy relationship communication with my loved ones and even like professors and doctors. It's on such a level now that I didn't even know was possible in life, you know? So like I said in the beginning, communication is a lifeline. And if you don't have communication, it's a very scary place to be. Yeah. I don't really know where to go after that, but
Yeah. I mean, I think when I thought I have so much to talk about when it comes to communication, and I never had to deal with any of the cognitive issues that you guys were struggling with. But I feel like looking back on when I was really sick, like I feel like most of the trauma and the PTSD that I have now is because of communication issues. Like talking to these doctors and like they just don't understand that there's anything wrong, or I mean, I always just go back to people not believing me. And I remember my mom pulling me aside and saying like, I'm just concerned because it feels like you're spending so much time and effort and energy trying to convince us that there's something really wrong with you. And I think for me, like that's the biggest thing about communication is like I remember like thinking, what can I say to get people to get it? Like what string of words can I use where people will go, oh, and I never found them. I never found the right words. And it wasn't until I started interacting with other people who were in my situation where I finally felt heard. And that not being heard for so long, which we hear all the time from people, I think really does damage. I think it really does emotional and psychological. It's trauma. It's just trauma. I have to ask you guys, because I thought of it, Jennifer, while you were talking. You were both, before you got sick, super creative. I mean, we're all creative people. I'm a singer-songwriter. Jennifer, you're a singer. Haley, you do drawing and painting.
I do a little of everything.
Yeah. And not only like when you can't put words together, that's one thing. But like Jennifer, you're like I mean, I'll call you world-class like incredible operatic singer and performer.
Agreed.
Just unbelievable. And I know how hard it was for me. My identity, so much of my identity was wrapped up in being a songwriter, but what's a songwriter who doesn't write songs? Then I'm nothing, you know? And so for you guys, what was it like to have this creativity and this form of expression be taken away? Because it's not just, hey, how you doing, and communicating. It's literally like your personality and your creativity and who you are as a person.
Who do you want to go first,
Either one.
Jennifer?
Let's have Jennifer. Go ahead.
Haley, go.
Okay, I'll go.
You don't have to answer the question. I just think
Pass.
I just think people will really relate to that, because we have so many people who are sick, and they're the stuff that makes them gets taken away.
Yeah,
You know?
no, I'm happy to talk about this a little bit. I mean,
I will too. I just
yeah, you need a sec.
You guys are doing great.
So for me, being creative wasn't it almost was a career path. So never mind. It wasn't already a career path, I should say. I was going to go to school for graphic design, and I have very incredible artists in my family. So I was always drawing and making jewelry and, just everything creative all the time. And it was mainly a form of therapy for me. And I thought graphic design would be a cool way to make money and still be creative. And then when I got sick, I had zero ability to mix colors. And my favorite thing to do was colored pastels. I would do like realistic animal drawings. And I couldn't put my brain on paper anymore, basically, is the most simple way I know how to put it. I would go to draw something and nothing would happen. And I would go to mix colors and it would be brown instead of pink, or just nothing worked anymore. The transmitters weren't transmitting. And that was the last thing I had left that was enjoyable, that Lyme hadn't taken away from me. So when that did get taken away from me, it was, to put it lightly, soul crushing. And I knew I wasn't going to be a graphic designer anymore. I was pretty sure I was never going to draw again. It was just.
Are you drawing now?
I do a little, not as much as I would like to, because I'm usually reading textbooks at the moment.
You're pretty busy
for school.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, what I'm doing at school, the way acupuncture is practiced, it's also a creative form, and the treatments we create for patients are, to me, it's like an art piece. So I feel pretty fulfilled with my creativity with that. But yeah, I mean, I can draw now. I still struggle with color, which is frustrating for sure. But I do a lot of pencil drawings and things like that, more simple stuff. And I've kind of reached out to other forms of art, like embroidery and wood burning and things like that. So it's another part that's, the sense of self and the self identity goes out the window, and you have to figure out where to find it again.
Jennifer?
So this is next month, we're going to have identity be the topic.
Yeah.
Oh
But
boy.
interestingly, these are related, as you say. I guess wow, I thought the first question was hard to talk about, and this
Was not my goal to like put you guys on the spot. I really thought this was gonna be like light and fun, and then
This is one of the hardest things for me to deal with, like emotionally. And I remain in awe and like I think that you two plus Brooke, you talk about your experiences very well and in a way like what Haley said earlier about Generation Lyme helped me get better at communicating. And not just the three of you, definitely the three of you, but the community at large. Because I was not ever able to put these things into words, and I'm not sure it would have been so much harder to do it alone on my own. I don't know that I would have, and I still struggle with it now, but at least I can put it to words for me. I know how I feel about it privately, and I can put it to words for myself privately, and that's a big improvement from how it was before, because you can at least work through your feelings when you can put them together. But this, for me, to answer your question about, what's the singer that doesn't sing kind of question. I too was always like a creative, person. I actually have a visual art high school diploma that's like on top of the normal high school diploma.
wait,
And
so like drawing or something?
yeah, like visual art,
So you're just good at
any
all
medium.
of the things.
I mean, I finished the course, and the option senior year of high school is either to, take art again, your AP art again, or do something else. But I was always singing in the class and they were like, please join the chorus, the choir, whatever. And,
I could see that.
So it's like
see that.
practicing harmonizing and stuff. And I've always loved making things. So writing and like cooking and baking, and it is very therapeutic to do these things.
Really good at baking, by the way.
Thanks. But the singing thing obviously stuck in a more serious way than anything else. Art's like, painting is kind of this therapy that I have for myself. And, if other people like it, that's really awesome. But singing and performing is something that I, as the teachers say, you should only do it if you really can't imagine yourself doing anything else. And I would always be like, they would say, if you can't imagine yourself doing literally anything else, do that thing. Like, don't
That's
do
what I
this.
say to
It's
people
too
all the
hard.
time.
Unless, unless this is the only thing that you feel like it's that serious. And then the second thing is, okay, now you tell me if you think I should do something else. Because nope, don't let me waste my time and money. And please. And but so I got the encouragement to continue singing, and things were going, as they went fine, they went well, except for the fact that my health wasn't good. And my health would kind of go up and down, and there's a lot of really interesting stories that go along with that experience, where in the industry, at least for me at the time, and especially considering the fact that I did not have a diagnosis, it was like, and I was singing as a soprano, which is, the high voice type. There are so many, and the industry doesn't need you. So if there's something wrong, and I'm using air quotes, if there's something wrong with you, you're out. Especially if there's something like wrong with you that's going to make you inconsistent or a liability in some way. And, illness at the time had way more of a stigma, I would say, than it does now. Like physical impairment of any kind and illness. I would say that in the past, 10 years, things have actually gone well relatively in terms of the way the world generally it's still bad, but
Better.
like generally,
It's
no,
better.
but like
Yeah.
It's not.
the
yeah.
opera world is 100 years behind literally everything else. It's a very old medium. So like it's full of other things that are still that the rest of the world is like in many ways caught up on. But so anyway, and Haley's like opera. But no, so I hid to the best of my ability what I was going through, which is a huge communication issue. You're a singer and you're performing, you're communicating, you're trying to communicate everything, you're sharing all the time. But I was also hiding something all the time, at all times. And sometimes I was hiding it a little, and sometimes I was hiding it a lot, but there was always a wall. And sometimes I could connect super well to what I was performing if it was a role or a piece that I felt really strongly about. It wasn't as obvious. And other times, if it was like a fully staged thing, I could throw myself into it. If I'm like dying, or if I'm killing, I can play these roles where they're so hyper dramatic that I could, get into that. But there were some other things where if it was really raw, if I had an audition, if I had an intimate recital, if someone was right in front of me, I would feel so exposed, almost like they could see my health for what it was. They could see my body doing its or not doing what it was supposed to do. And I was not right in the head about it. I did not feel okay. And I would always be nervous. And as I got better at singing, I could hide it better and better, and I could like tamp down my sort of nerves. But yeah, it was something that bothered me because I was like, I'm not even being honest. Sometimes I'm being honest, but I'm hiding something all the time. And then, and obviously I'm hiding something from the people I know. And then ultimately, I kept going, but then I would have to pull out of gigs or pull out of opportunities or not apply to something, and then, or feel like I was ready to go for something. And then my health would be like a mess that day. And, so it was like a little bit all over. And this would happen, I remember this happening in Belgium, and I remember that when I was doing a show. I remember this happening when I had a big audition in New York, as it got as I got closer to my diagnosis, and I pressed on to figure it out and address it head on, like acknowledge that I had an issue, figure out what it was, and deal with it, whatever it was, because I was sick of that, because that was not serving me. My health wasn't getting any better. It was getting worse. My singing was getting better, but it was only coming out, even if it was like 80% of the time or 90% of the time, it was like, and as long as my health was getting worse, it did not matter. And I had to make a conscious choice to out myself and take the risk that, I couldn't sing again. Because once I got my Lyme diagnosis, Lyme and Co., I looked into what it would take to, what treatment might be like. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get a lot worse before I get be better, because I was already going way down. And so I decided to basically put some stuff out on social media. And I did this because I was feeling compelled to do it. I was also advised to do it by some people in my life, because that would enable me to connect with people who I could relate to and who could provide answers. And, it was like kind of the catalyst actually to meeting you and being part of Generation Lyme, because it was like a little beacon, for me. I didn't have the answer. I don't have any answers then, but it was like, I'm here, I'm one of you. And and it was a big deal. But then the people in my life, it's like there, of course, were people who were like, this is no longer a viable person, even as like not just as a performer, but as a friend, as a that. And so part of me felt really relieved and really healed. And then, another part has been missing this thing, because I put my stuff away. I put it away, and nothing has replaced it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all of that, and I can't imagine how upsetting that must be. Mostly just because you're so talented and so good, and it's just one of an infinite number of heartbreaking things about this illness and this community. And but thank you for sharing about it, because I could relate so much to so much of what you said. We're gonna wrap up here in a second. We always say these are gonna be short, and then I don't know exactly how long it's been, but it's definitely not short, which is perfect. Um, but I guess I'd like to end the way we've ended some of these other topic podcasts, and that is just what you would want somebody to know, especially if they're early in their Lyme journey and maybe they're frustrated or stressed about communicating, whether that's with the people in their lives or their doctors or themselves or whatever it is, because I know that we've all had conversations with new patients, and communication comes up a lot in those conversations. So Haley, we'll start with you. What's something that you would say to somebody in the Lyme community who is feeling frustrated with their current level of communication?
So many things. But just listening to you and Jennifer talk a little, something popped in my head, so I'll share that. But it's that communication goes two ways and not just one. I think for however long we've been talking about how we communicate with other people in the world. And a lot of the times it feels like we can't communicate. Sometimes we physically cannot, but sometimes it's frustrating because it feels like people aren't receiving what we're saying or trying to communicate. And that doesn't always mean that you're not communicating things correctly or properly. And I just want to stress that, people say like it takes two to tango kind of thing. Some people don't want to communicate. And for some people, it's too hard to hear what someone is going through. Doesn't mean they're a bad person, just means that they are in a different space. Could be a bad person, could be a good person. You never know. Jesse, I know you're reeling, but
Woo!
yeah, I just want to emphasize that it goes both ways, and not to put all the responsibility of being able to communicate what you're going through, how you're feeling, what you need from people, anything that goes under the communication umbrella. Don't put the pressure on yourself that it's 100% your responsibility to take care of it all. I just think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's great. Jennifer, what would you say to somebody who's dealing with their... Oh, we got a guest, Haley's cat, Robbie.
I've been on the phone too long.
Jennifer, what would you say to a new Lyme patient who's struggling with their communicating?
I was actually going to say something very similar. So super agree. With like one caveat, because I think sometimes we just have to we're responsible for doing, for like caring for ourselves, because most of the time, somebody else isn't going to come in and save us, however, the thing that's not our responsibility, exactly to Haley's point, is whether or not other people get it. We can't control how other people receive what we're saying. We can only continue to work on how we get our words out and our points, etc. And so to that effect, yeah, one big thing is listening. So for us to keep listening and listen to each other and to encourage other people to listen to us. But then, so breaking off from that though, there are a lot of resources that can help new Lyme patients communicate better and perhaps help people with issues of not being believed in their lives. Like there are nonprofits out there with educational resources that are evidence-based and easy to digest. So, we've got lots of stuff at Project Lyme, and there are plenty of other places where you can go and get information that you might need or want to share to be like, what I'm describing is legitimate. And they've explained it even better than I can right now. Here, plus we've got Generation Lyme, and I would always advise going to a meetup or at least going to the online space to start, going to meetups to connect with people who understand. And even if you're just listening to start, because that's so huge, just to, as Jesse, as you said, feel heard. It calms the nervous system, which is something we all need so badly.
So much.
And it can help
Amen.
us practice communicating. And it's been something that and like even work out what we want to say. And it's something that we've all benefited from. And then we can, a lot of people have graduated to hosting, and that's been really great too. So there are lots of things that, even if you're struggling with communication, and there's, we've got lots of ways that make it a little more accessible. So you can leave your camera off. You don't have to share. There are captions you can read. Just because there are lots of ways that people can not just have trouble communicating, but just be different or want or need to communicate differently from the next person. And, just being as open as possible and encouraging that. I know it's hard, but if the people in your life aren't open to it, there are other people that you can connect with who will be, like Generation Lyme.
Such a good
And
plug.
you get
What a plug.
Be a cool
And then-
dude.
and I just feel like we end up putting these kind of really unhelpful, closed-minded, not helpful, not uncommunicative people into the minority in our lives when we come together.
Mhm.
Love that. Well, I was going to say that, so now I don't have to, but you should listen to Jennifer and certainly join a meetup if you would like to. Although we know some of you don't come to meetups, and that's okay too. We love you anyway. I would just say to a new Lyme patient, I think just from being on the meetups and hosting and hearing people share, I find that so many Lyme patients apologize for themselves and don't speak up when they know that they should, whether that's in a medical situation with a doctor, or they're upset about something with somebody in their lives, but they're so worried about being a burden on their loved ones that they just hold it in. And I think that's one of the worst things you can do. I also just like to remind people that totally healthy people sometimes suck at communicating too. So just do the best that you can, and you're probably doing way better than you think. And sometimes people who, have no cognitive issues or anything and no brain fog are really bad at communicating. So, just
They haven't had to work on it.
Yeah. So just do your best. But I think we'll wrap it up there. Haley and Jennifer, thank you so much for being here and being so wonderful and vulnerable for the people listening.
Thank you for being here,
Oh,
Jesse.
it's
Yes, thank you,
my
Jesse.
pleasure.
Jesse Ruben, everyone.
I
Jesse
love
Ruben.
this. Oh, you know I love applause. Shout out to our fellow board member, Brooke Stoddard, who could not join us this evening, but I'm sure we'll get him on a future podcast. Again, if you have been listening thus far and you've made it to the end, thank you so much for being here. You can get more information at genlyme.org, GENLYME. We've got meetups about our podcast. We've got information about our meetups and about our podcast. And if you want to host meetups, we have information there too. If you want to share your story on our account, you can. If you just want to follow along and not feel so alone in the world, that is totally fine as well. And other than that, thanks for being here. And if there's anything we can do for you, let us know. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys. You did great.
Thanks.
Thanks.